What if I told you that you could destroy your enemies without ever raising your voice, without saying a word, without even acknowledging their presence? You see, we've been conditioned to think that winning a battle means engaging in it. That strength is loud, visible, and forceful. But the truth, the most dangerous people in any room don't bark. They don't chase. They watch. They calculate. And when the moment's right, they don't fight. They end it. Now I'm not talking about physical enemies. I'm talking about the people who try to break you with gossip, with manipulation, with doubt, the ones who underestimate you, disrespect you, or silently root for your failure. You know who I'm talking about, because chances are you've already pictured them. So here's the question. How do you eliminate that kind of enemy without swinging back? Over the next few minutes, I'm going to show you 10 ways to do exactly that. No fists, no shouting, no emotional explosions, just smart, subtle, surgical strategies to dismantle every bit of power they think they have over you. Because the strongest weapon you will ever carry is the ability to control yourself so deeply that nothing and no one can pull you into their chaos. That's not passivity. That's power. And today you're going to learn how to use it. Let's begin. When we hear the word enemy, most of us imagine someone external, a rival, a betrayer, a toxic boss, a manipulative friend, a competitor who wants what we have. That's the surface level definition we've grown up with. But if you really want to destroy your enemy without ever fighting them, you need to first understand what you're actually up against. And that starts by reframing what the word enemy even means. Because here's the truth. Your biggest enemy is rarely just another person. It's the effect that person has on your mind, the reaction they trigger in you, the way they hijack your peace, your energy, your confidence, your time. That's where the real threat lives. Not in them, but in what they awaken within you. Your enemy is the voice in your head that keeps repeating what they said about you. It's the knot in your stomach every time they walk into a room. It's the way your focus shatters because you can't stop thinking about how to prove them wrong. That's psychological warfare, and whether you realize it or not, you've probably been in the middle of it before. Let's be honest, there are people in your life who have never laid a hand on you, but they've cut deeper than anyone else ever has. Maybe they've humiliated you with words. Maybe they've tried to control your choices, manipulate your worth, or convince others that you're something you're not. And if you're not careful, your entire world becomes about them. What they think, what they're doing, how to get ahead of them, how to stop them. That's not living. That's reacting. And reacting is how you lose. If you want to win, you need to stop playing their game. You need to understand that the real battlefield is internal. It's emotional. And until you master yourself, the enemy doesn't even have to touch you to defeat you. They just have to know what buttons to push and watch you self-destruct. That's why the first real move in destroying your enemy without ever fighting them is to detach, not from the situation, but from the role you've been cast in. Because make no mistake, once you label someone as your enemy, you're assigning yourself a part in their story. You become the opponent. You take on the burden of proving something, of getting revenge, of showing them you're not the one to mess with. But every second you spend trying to win that game is energy you're stealing from your own mission. You can't chase growth and get caught in drama at the same time. So what's the alternative? You start treating your enemy like a mirror, not to reflect your flaws, but to reveal your emotional triggers. What does this person activate in you? Insecurity, rage, jealousy, the need for validation? That's your work. That's your weapon. Because once you identify how someone gets under your skin, you can start building the armor that makes you untouchable. You don't control people. You control access. You control reaction. And when you learn how to respond to provocation with clarity instead of chaos, they lose the one thing they thought they had over you: influence. And this isn't about walking away from confrontation out of weakness. It's about standing in front of it and not flinching. It's about becoming the kind of person who can see everything, feel everything, and still respond with precision. Because emotional composure doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care strategically. It means you're not letting anyone drag you into a war that only benefits them. Now here's the part most people don't want to hear. Sometimes your enemy is you. It's the voice in your head that doubts your worth. It's your fear of failure. It's your need for approval. The irony is we often project those inner enemies onto other people. We see threats where there are just triggers. We assign blame to others for wounds we haven't healed in ourselves. But once you understand that, you stop giving people power they don't deserve. And you begin to realize people who try to bring you down are often revealing more about themselves than about you. Their tactics, insults, exclusion, criticism, silence are just projections of their own weakness. And when you're solid in who you are, you can see through it like glass. You stop reacting to noise. You start analyzing patterns, and you make decisions not from pain, but from power. There's a calm that comes with that, a control. You're not faking detachment. You're not suppressing emotions. You're just not handing your state of mind to someone who hasn't earned it. That's how you destroy someone without lifting a finger. You become unaffected, not because you're numb, but because you're aware. You know exactly who you are. You know what you're here to do, and you're not stepping off that path for anyone. So when I say reframe your enemy, I'm not asking you to downplay real harm or ignore real challenges. I'm asking you to upgrade your strategy to stop wasting energy on people and patterns that feed on your reaction, and to start using those same interactions as training grounds for mental dominance. Because the moment you stop seeing your enemy as a person and start seeing them as an opportunity to grow, to heal, to sharpen your discipline, you've already begun the process of destroying them quietly, completely, without ever entering the ring. Power doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need to announce itself when it walks into a room. Real power is silent. It's presence without performance. And when it comes to dismantling your enemies without ever fighting them, that's the exact kind of power you need to master. We live in a culture where noise is mistaken for influence, where people believe the louder they are, the more powerful they appear. But volume isn't power, it's often insecurity in disguise. People who scream the loudest about how strong they are usually trying to convince themselves just as much as they're trying to convince you. And if you're smart, you'll never fall for that performance. Silent power is rooted in control, the kind of control that doesn't react to every jab, doesn't need to defend its reputation every time it's challenged, and doesn't waste time chasing the validation of people who don't matter. It's the kind of power that keeps moving forward, regardless of who's trying to throw stones from the sidelines. And that kind of power is lethal because it's not distracted by ego. When someone tries to provoke you and you respond with stillness, they lose. Not because you beat them in some public argument, but because you refuse to participate in the emotional tug of war they were hoping to start. That silence, that lack of reaction, it unsettles people, it confuses them, it forces them to face their own noise without the comfort of your engagement. And that right there is a subtle kind of destruction. Let's be clear. Destruction doesn't always come in the form of confrontation. Sometimes it looks like restraint. Sometimes it's not clapping back at an insult, but calmly smiling and walking away. Sometimes it's not exposing the people who lied about you, but allowing time to do the work for you. Because time has a brutal way of revealing who was really who. And the people who operate from truth and patience always come out on top, because their foundation isn't built on performance, but principle. Now, that doesn't mean you become passive. This isn't about letting people walk all over you. It's about choosing your battles with surgical precision. There's a big difference between avoiding conflict out of fear and withholding engagement out of power. The former is weakness. The latter is dominance. Every time you choose silence over chaos, you're conserving energy. That energy gets redirected into building yourself, your skills, your reputation, your resilience. And the more you build, the more distance you create between you and anyone trying to take you down. Not because you ran, but because you outgrew them. That's the kind of destruction no one sees coming. Quiet, steady, complete. The people who are truly dangerous aren't reactive. They're calculated. They observe. They listen more than they speak. They notice patterns. And by the time they make a move, they've already won because they've gathered more information than the person across from them even realizes. That's the advantage of silence. It gives you space to think. It keeps others guessing. It makes you unpredictable. Most people will panic when they're insulted, challenged, or attacked. They'll lash out. They'll go into defense mode. But here's what they don't understand. The more reactive you are, the more control you give away. Every time you argue with someone who's beneath your level, every time you respond emotionally to something petty, you're telling the world they still have access to your center. And the real goal is to become so centered that nothing can pull you off balance. Power is presence. It's showing up, standing tall, and needing nothing from anyone in the room. It's when people stop speaking when you enter, not because they fear you, but because they respect you, and they don't even know why. It's when your name carries weight without you having to remind anyone of who you are. The people who master this kind of power aren't the ones flexing on social media. They're not arguing in comment sections or trying to prove themselves in every room they enter. They're building quietly, moving strategically, protecting their peace like it's sacred because it is. And their silence is not absence. It's focus, it's intent, it's clarity. When your enemy can't provoke you, they start unraveling, they start trying harder, getting louder, more erratic, because your stillness forces them to face their own lack of control. And eventually they exhaust themselves, not because you beat them in some battle, but because they spent all their energy trying to bait someone who refused to bite. Destruction doesn't always require a scene. Sometimes it's just letting someone talk themselves into irrelevance while you continue to rise. Sometimes it's letting your work speak louder than your voice ever could. And sometimes the most devastating move you can make is no move at all. Let them wonder what you're thinking. Let them sit with the silence. Let them feel the absence of your reaction. That's where the power lives. In restraint, in the pause, in the awareness that you could destroy them loudly, but you're choosing not to because you don't need to. Because by the time they realize what's happening, they'll already be standing in the ruins of the war. They tried to start, and you'll be miles ahead, untouched. That's what silent destruction looks like, and it's always more effective than the loud kind. Mastery of the self is the highest form of power. It's the kind of power that doesn't need an audience, doesn't need applause, and doesn't need recognition. When you know who you are, when you've learned how to regulate your emotions, discipline your thoughts, and control your impulses, you become unstoppable. Not because you control the world around you, but because nothing outside of you can shake what's inside of you. That's the ultimate advantage. And it's also the rarest. Most people walk through life reacting. They react to criticism. They react to disrespect. They react to rejection, jealousy, provocation, and pain. Their emotions pull them in 10 different directions, and they call it standing up for themselves. But if you're reacting, you're not standing. You're being pushed. You're not choosing your next move. You're being dragged into it. Real strength is the ability to feel everything and still remain calm. It's hearing something that would have broken the old version of you and choosing to breathe instead of explode. It's recognizing when your pride wants to lash out, but deciding to pause because you understand that pride is a trap. Self-mastery isn't about becoming numb. It's about becoming aware of your patterns, your blind spots, your defaults, and then breaking them. Every time you do, you reclaim power that used to belong to your enemies. Because let's be honest, your enemy doesn't need to defeat you directly. They just need to throw you off your center. That's it. They say something that gets under your skin and suddenly you're consumed. You're obsessing over it. You're replaying it. You're wasting time writing the perfect comeback. And while you're in that storm, they've already moved on. That's the cost of emotional instability. They don't have to fight you. You're doing their job for them. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine someone trying to trigger you and you feel that surge rise, but you don't move. You don't flinch. You observe it. You understand it. And then you decide what to do with it. That's power, the kind that can't be bought, can't be borrowed, and can't be faked. And once you build it, it's yours forever. Mastery of the self means you no longer seek revenge. You seek results. You're not trying to prove yourself to people who want to see you lose. You're too focused on actually winning. And when your focus shifts from reacting to rising, something changes. Your enemy becomes small, not because they've changed, but because you have. It's easy to talk about emotional intelligence. It's harder to live it when you're under pressure. When someone questions your integrity, when someone tries to embarrass you in front of others, when you're betrayed by someone you trusted, in those moments, your ego wants revenge. Your pride wants to show them they messed with the wrong person. But self-mastery reminds you that nothing they do defines you. Only your response does. And when you can choose the response that aligns with your values instead of your emotions, you win every time. But that kind of discipline takes practice. You don't wake up one day immune to chaos. You train for it. You learn your triggers. You stop blaming people for making you angry and start asking why you're so easy to push. You start doing the hard work of healing. Not because anyone else deserves forgiveness, but because you deserve freedom. Here's the irony. When you master yourself, your enemies start to disappear. Not because they've left, but because they can't access you anymore. They can't manipulate you. They can't provoke you. They can't pull you into the mud. It's like showing up to a battlefield and finding out your opponent has no weapons that work on you. That's not just a win. That's total domination. People respect calm confidence more than explosive emotion. When you carry yourself with quiet certainty, when you speak with purpose instead of rage, when you move with discipline instead of ego, people take notice. They may not say it, but they feel it. And the ones who wanted to see you lose, they start to panic because they were counting on your reaction. That was their plan. And when you refuse to give it to them, the plan falls apart. That's the beauty of self-mastery. It puts you back in control. You become your own anchor, your own regulator, your own protector. You no longer outsource your peace to other people's behavior. And in a world full of emotionally reactive, insecure, power-hungry individuals, being grounded is a superpower. But it comes with responsibility, because once you reach that level of internal control, you can't keep playing small. You can't keep engaging in petty drama. You can't afford to lower your energy to match people who haven't done their own work. Your silence, your standards, your self-respect, they become your armor. They send a message without you having to say a word. So when people come for you and you don't panic. You don't retaliate. You don't beg to be understood. You listen, you decide, you move on, and your enemy, they're left talking to themselves, wondering why nothing they do seems to touch you anymore. That's not a dream. That's the result of self-mastery, the ultimate advantage. Not in titles, not in dominance over others, but in ownership of yourself, your thoughts, your energy, your reactions. That's what makes you truly dangerous. Not your words, not your threats, but your ability to walk through fire untouched because you carry the flame inside of you. And nothing external can compete with that. Perception is power. It always has been. In any battle, personal, professional, or psychological, the person who controls the narrative holds the advantage. Because truth isn't always what actually happened. It's often what people believe happened. And if you're not shaping that belief, someone else is. The question is, are you going to let them? We live in a world where stories move faster than facts. Opinions become headlines. Silence is interpreted. A raised eyebrow can say more than a 5-minute speech. This is not paranoia, it's reality. And if you don't understand how you're being perceived, you're walking blind in a room full of cameras. Your reputation, your body language, the way you respond under pressure, every single one of those things tells a story. People are always watching, always interpreting. The people who destroy their enemies without fighting don't just play the game, they manage the story. You don't need to lie to control perception. In fact, manipulation is a weak strategy. It always collapses. What you need is clarity. You need to know who you are, how you operate, and what kind of presence you want to project. And then you stay consistent with it, because that's where credibility comes from. Not from shouting the loudest, but from showing up the same way every time, no matter who's watching. Here's the trick. Most people try to control other people's opinions. That's a losing game. You can't make someone like you. You can't convince everyone. You're right. But what you can do is build a narrative around your values, your actions, and your outcomes. So solid that when someone tries to distort it, it doesn't stick. it falls apart. People see through it. Why? Because your record speaks louder than their gossip ever could. When someone tries to paint you as reactive, but you've consistently shown composure, people notice the mismatch. When they call you weak, but your choices show resilience, focus, and growth. No one buys it. When they say you're arrogant, but your behavior shows discipline and restraint, they get exposed by their own exaggeration. But that only works if you've already built the narrative through consistent action. You don't wait until you're under attack to clarify who you are. You do that before the war even starts. Perception doesn't mean being fake. It means being intentional. You walk into a room with purpose. You speak like your words carry weight. You carry yourself like someone who doesn't need validation. That changes how people approach you. It changes what they assume about you. And those assumptions become part of your armor. Because when your presence says, I'm not here to compete with noise, people tend to lower their volume. And when someone tries to challenge you, because they will, you don't swing. You don't shout. You let your narrative do the work. The things you've already done, the respect you've already earned, the people who have already seen how you move, when things get messy, that's where your power lives. Not in the comeback, but in the track record. You don't destroy your enemies by dragging them down. You destroy them by continuing to rise, unaffected, and letting their own bitterness reveal itself in contrast to your focus. People believe what they see repeated. So repeat the right story, repeat excellence, repeat emotional control, repeat growth. If you used to be someone who reacted emotionally, but now you pause before you speak, let people see that change. If you were once scattered and unfocused, but now you move with direction, let that become your new story. Because perception isn't static, it evolves. You just have to be the one steering it. There's power in knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. There's power in responding with facts when someone comes at you with assumptions. And there's even more power in choosing to say nothing at all. Because sometimes silence, when used correctly, speaks louder than any defense you could offer. When someone lies about you and you don't take the bait, that unnerves them. It exposes their desperation, and it leaves everyone watching with a clear picture. One person is calm, the other is scrambling. One is in control, the other is emotional. And that image becomes the narrative. The most effective people in any high-stakes environment, whether it's business, leadership, law enforcement, or personal life, understand one thing. They don't just fight for results. They fight for the right story about who they are and how they move. Because they know once that narrative is solid, it becomes a shield. You can't stop people from attacking you, but you can make their attacks irrelevant. Don't just aim to be successful. Aim to be known for the way you handle pressure, the way you rise above, the way you refuse to play dirty, even when you're being dragged through the mud. That's the kind of story people remember. That's the kind of perception that becomes untouchable. And when your enemies try to rewrite it, they fail, because no one believes the villain when the hero has already shown their work. So yes, perception is power, but not in the shallow, performative way the world teaches you. It's not about being fake. It's about being deliberate. It's about making sure that the way people perceive you lines up with who you actually are. And that means you stay rooted in truth, sharpened by discipline, and grounded in character. When you own your narrative, you control the room, you control how conflict unfolds, and without ever throwing a punch, raising your voice, or retaliating, you dismantle your enemy's position quietly, strategically, permanently. There is no deeper form of destruction than turning your enemy into a non-factor, someone so irrelevant to your growth, your peace, and your path that they no longer even register. No words, no conflict, no final showdown, just distance, silence, and a complete absence of attention. That's not avoidance. That's power. That's choosing not just to win, but to outgrow the game entirely. It might feel counterintuitive. We're taught to confront, to clap back, to prove ourselves, but that only keeps your enemy in your orbit. The more energy you spend thinking about how to defeat someone, the more space they occupy in your mind, and the more space they occupy, the more power they hold. So the real strategy, the one that actually leaves a mark, is to become so focused, so elevated, and so disciplined in your own mission that they can no longer reach you emotionally, mentally, energetically. They fade, and the absence of your attention becomes the loudest response they'll ever hear. Your enemy feeds off reaction. That's the fuel. Whether they want you angry, insecure, defensive, or desperate, they win the moment you give them access to your peace. You don't have to fight them. You don't have to talk about them. You just have to remove what they want most. Your engagement. That's where irrelevance begins. Not in some dramatic exit, but in the quiet decision to no longer care. Here's what happens when you truly walk away. They scramble. Because people who thrive on drama expect you to match their noise. When you don't, they either escalate or disappear. Either way, you win. Because the emotional tether that once connected you to them is cut. And once it's cut, you can redirect that energy into something far more valuable. Yourself. You can start investing in your goals. You can use the pain they cause as fuel for your progress. You can stop replaying conversations in your head and start building the future they never saw coming. And here's the beauty of it. The higher you climb, the smaller they look. Not because they changed, but because your perspective did. People don't shrink. Your vision expands. Irrelevance is the ultimate revenge because it doesn't require action. It requires evolution. It's not about pretending they don't matter. It's about reaching a point where they actually don't. When you no longer seek closure, when you no longer need validation, when you're so far gone on your own path that you have to remind yourself they were ever part of the story. That's not forgetting, that's healing. It's important to understand that turning someone into a non-factor doesn't mean you erase what happened. It means you alchemize it. Use the betrayal, the disrespect, the underestimation as a lesson, and then you move on. Not bitter, not bruised, but better. Because what they did doesn't define you. How you responded does. And choosing to evolve instead of engage is a response that echoes. The people who once wanted to break you will be forced to watch you become everything they said you couldn't. Not because you set out to prove them wrong, but because you were too busy proving yourself right. That's when the silence becomes deafening. That's when the absence becomes felt. When they realize they've lost the one thing they truly wanted, your focus. Think about it. What's more devastating than being completely ignored by someone who once gave you space in their mind? What's more powerful than outgrowing someone without ever needing to humiliate them? It leaves no path back in, no dialogue, no comeback, just a locked door and a life too full to look back. But getting there takes discipline. It takes a conscious decision to choose growth over ego. It means saying no to petty battles. It means resisting the urge to check their social media, to respond to their passive-aggressive comments, to prove a point. You stop explaining, you stop defending, you stop performing, because none of that serves you. Only silence does. And not just external silence, internal silence. That's when you've really won. When their name doesn't trigger anything, when your thoughts don't spiral, when your energy stays intact, that kind of peace isn't loud, but it's powerful, it's grounded, and it's earned. Some people will try everything to stay in your head. They'll bait you with indirect messages, gossip, or sudden attempts to reconnect. Don't fall for it. They're not looking for resolution. They're looking for access. Keep the door closed. Keep your boundaries sharp, because the moment you let them back in, the moment you re-engage, you start feeding the very dynamic you worked so hard to escape. The truth is, not everyone deserves closure. Not everyone deserves an explanation. Sometimes the best ending is no ending at all. Just distance. Just indifference. Just silence. Let them wonder, let them talk, let them fill in the blanks. That's not your concern anymore. You've moved on. Turning your enemy into irrelevance isn't passive. It's intentional. It's the quietest strategy with the loudest impact. Because while they were plotting your failure, you were building your life. While they were watching you, you were watching your own growth. And now they don't even register on your radar. That's not just power, that's peace. And once you taste that, you'll never go back. At the end of the day, the most powerful form of destruction is not loud, not messy, and not dramatic. It's calm, it's disciplined, it's deliberate. You don't destroy your enemies by becoming like them. You destroy them by becoming so much more than they ever expected. So focused, so elevated, and so untouchable that their words, their tactics, their very presence lose all meaning. This isn't about ego, it's about evolution. You don't need to prove who you are when you embody who you are. Your growth, your silence, your composure, that is the response. And while your enemies are busy watching you, you stay busy building a life that leaves them behind. So the next time someone comes for you, remember this, they want your energy. They want your reaction. Don't give it to them. Give them distance. Give them silence. Give them the gift of watching you rise without ever needing to look their way. Because the final, undeniable, irreversible defeat is indifference. And once you stop fighting and start outgrowing, you don't just win, you end the war. For good.